Hey, everybody, welcome back to Reasonably Happy. My guest today is Lara Love. She is the four-time New York Times bestselling author of an incredible book called The Many Lives of Mama Love, a memoir of lying, stealing, writing, and healing, which recounts her slide from soccer mom to heroin addict to jailhouse shot caller. But you didn't see that one coming in your life when you were a young person. This book ripped my face off in so many incredible ways. And for that reason, not because of me personally, but because of its effect on the reader, it was selected as the 104th installment of Oprah's book club. I should have used the active voice there instead of the passive voice. Oprah selected this outstanding book to be the 104th installment of her book club. Welcome, Lara. So nice to meet you.
It's so nice to meet you.
You don't look like a felon. Do you get that often?
Well, yeah, it's not the first thing people think of when they look at me.
Yeah.
Maybe like the fifth thing.
Well, maybe we'll talk about why that is and why and what that says about our society and about the penal system. But before we get into all that, I want to ask you, where and when do you find yourself the happiest?
Right now, I feel like I should say like when I'm with my children, but I'm going to be honest.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm living in the place that my baseline is the happiest.
Okay.
And that is Hawaii. And when I was 21 years old, I said, someday I will live there. So it took a few minutes or a few decades. And so I'm happiest there. I'm happiest staring at the ocean.
Is it the vibration of Hawaii?
It's the air. There's something in the air. And I remember when I was in jail, there was a postcard of Hawaii, 16 years ago. Right now, I was in jail. And there was a postcard of Hawaii. Some girl had it on her window for a minute, and then you're not allowed to do that, so the guards ripped it up. And I remember staring at the island, and I was like, I will never go there again. I will never be able to go somewhere like that again. So for both those reasons, it feels really good to be there right now.
Do you get island fever?
No, because even when I'm not on an island, my radius is like 5 miles around my house. My everyday radius. So I'm on the biggest island in Hawaii, the Big Island. But I don't.
I was there with my family 2 or 3 years ago, and it is a magical place. The light, the air, the flora, is the aromas walking around. It's mind blowing.
Yeah,
so it's a symphony of senses that get stimulated.
Yeah, and I love a place where, like at sunset, everyone just, no matter where they are, it's like seeing a sci-fi movie. Everyone leaves the building, even like the gas station, the grocery store, and they go and they just stare at the sunset every night. And it's like such a beautiful, hopeful humanity thing that I love
wild.
that.
Well, you have lived many lives, and it is a very aptly titled book because you've been a soccer mom, you've been incarcerated, you've had a resurrection of sorts, and even with all the glory you've had, life still isn't perfect. Tell me about how life was like when you were a kid.
So, I did my whole childhood in the book in like 3 paragraphs. And part of that was on purpose because I wanted to be the only villain in my story, right? But life was confusing as a kid. It was chaos and violence and a lot of addiction and alcoholism that I realize now, but I didn't know then. It was just confusing. It was nobody around or the police around kind of thing. So my escape from that was to read. The first line of my book is reading was my first addiction. And I just remember I read from a really young age and I just sort of hid out in my closet or hid out at school reading. I loved being at school. I didn't like being at home.
You read Gone with the Wind twice in first grade. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty big book.
I know. It's like 1,100 pages. I remember, like little tiny print. I loved it.
And what was it that drew you to that story?
I don't know that like I actively sought it out. I don't know how. It was probably in my house. I just read whatever was there sort of desperately. I remember someone around that age, I went to the movie and it had an intermission, which was so confusing to me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I didn't know what it meant. I didn't
Right.
understand Civil
You got to
War.
sell
I didn't
popcorn.
understand.
Come on.
Yeah, but it was, you know, like 6-hour movie or something crazy at the time. But I just loved, you know, like people in books had clear motivations for what they did. And I read, you know, and I loved that. I loved like peeking at other people's worlds and understanding people through books, because there's always an arc. And it's clear why people are doing things. And in real life, it wasn't always that clear to me.
You lost at least one sibling, right?
I lost 2 siblings. I lost a sister when I was 19. She was an alcoholic as a teenager, and she died in a solo drunk driving crash in Boston. She was a passenger. And then I lost a brother, older brother, to a heroin overdose.
Oh, wow. How old was he?
Let's see. I had my children were young, so he was, you know, maybe late 30s.
Wow.
Yeah.
When did you start dabbling with, well, substances in general, but then opiates in particular?
I like to say I was like a late bloomer and an overachiever in everything I do.
You got to catch up.
I know. I always go extra. I'm extra, as my kids say. You know, in college, I went to school at UC Santa Cruz, right? So
That's the banana slugs, right?
Yeah, the banana slugs. And, you know, everyone partied in college, but it wasn't an issue for me. It was kind of, you know, I worked like 4 jobs. I was paying for school. But it was only when I was in my first marriage, I had my 3, I went to graduate school, got an MFA in creative writing. My first son was born 2 weeks later after my thesis, or 2 weeks before my thesis was due. I had 3 boys in 4.5 years. I was married. I was so determined to have like the family I didn't have growing up, and like happily ever after. And we were very young. I was 24 when I had my first son. And my first husband was cheating on me. And I remember the first time, you know, this was also the mid-90s, before the opiate crisis was a crisis. And opiates, Vicodin specifically, was handed out in sample packs at every medical office, the dentist. Every time you gave birth, you were given it. You know, they had little blister packs, like in a bowl, like Halloween candy.
Right.
I remember this. And so it wasn't an issue for me, but I remember the first time I took a pill for pain that was not physical pain. It was emotional pain. So I was dealing with
But
infidelity.
you had it around.
I had it around. Everybody has it around.
Right,
Or everybody
yeah.
had it around.
Yeah.
They give it to you after every childbirth. So I remember taking the pill, and it sounds like I'm taking a birth control pill, an opiate pain medication pill. And I was in emotional pain. My husband was cheating on me. I had 3 little kids at home. I was facing the reality that I was not going to have the normal family that I thought everybody else had growing up, you know, this happily ever after. I really wanted that. And I think now, looking back, you know, I probably was depressed. Maybe I had postpartum depression. No one talked about that then either. And I certainly, if I was depressed, I would never have told anyone. I would never have said anything other than I have it all together and everything's figured out. So I remember taking it, and the feeling it gave me and the way it lit up my brain didn't make me sleepy. It didn't, like stereotypical, you think like people are like nodding out and all that. For me, I was like, oh, I'm happier.
Yeah.
I'm funnier. I'm smarter. I can pretend everything's okay. I can play army guys, which isn't that exciting, and do laundry and all of those things.
As a mom by yourself with those 3 kids, a lot of responsibility, a lot of loneliness probably in that time, right?
Yeah.
I remember, so I had a lot of dental work done in the early 2000s, and they gave me some Vicodin afterwards, and I had to give a talk the next day, and I took one, and I just was like on stage, and I felt bulletproof. And I was like, I feel exactly the way I'm supposed to feel. Why'd they only give me 4 of these? Because I would have kept taking them.
Right.
Because it takes away all that doubt that you have in your brain, that whatever you see in the mirror that isn't perfect, it's like it wipes it all away.
Yeah. And I think everybody has their thing. My thing was never alcohol. It was that.
Yeah.
That gave me that. Like, I liked the way I felt.
So how long did that go before you were like, uh-oh?
the feeling I got from one pill, and then I took again. And I remember, and I wrote about this in the book, I think I had taken like maybe 3 pills in one day. And again, I knew I wasn't in physical pain. Maybe it was 4. And I went to my husband at the time, my first husband, that we were going through this. And I said, hey, look, I'm really scared. I've been taking these and I don't want to. And, his response, he put him up in the top of the linen closet, like really high. He's 6'4", like really high. And he's like, oh, everybody does it. It's no big deal. And I was like, okay. And so I was like, okay, they're gone. They're away. But I certainly clocked where they were. And I didn't take any for a while, and then I wanted to take one again. And I was like, well, I don't have a problem because, look, I just stopped for a while and got a chair and climbed up to the top of the linen closet and started again. And I did that on and off for probably a decade, where I'd stop, and I knew this is not who I was or what I wanted to do, but that I didn't have any other coping skills, really. And so that, like, one time, taking 3 a day turned into 60. Before I stopped. 60 to 20 for breakfast, 20 for lunch, 20 for dinner.
How are you getting them?
They were mail order back then. You could order them from
Really?
Florida.
Florida, of course. Where else would you get your Vicodin?
You could order them from Florida. And I was a real estate agent, so sometimes I'd peruse medicine cabinets.
Right.
Hopefully I won't go back to jail for confessing
Any
to
real
things.
estate agents want to find some statins and maybe a little Viagra. Yeah, I'm just saying, you're not going to find any Vicodin, but you might have a fun, you'll get your cholesterol all freed up.
But it really was everywhere. Like, everybody had prescriptions in their houses back then. And so, and then I stopped, and every time I would stop, I had this little mantra, like, choose life, because I knew it was self-destructive. I knew it was not who I was and not how I wanted to be. But I couldn't, like, for the life of me, ask for help or admit that I was, like, not in control. And then right before the book starts, like probably the 11 months before my book starts, I had 6 years, like, clean off of them. And
were you in a program?
I did like a 12-step, I went to meetings. I was like the poster girl, right? I knew how to say all the right things, but I didn't really do the work. I used to bring the meetings into the jail, train the people who were going to bring the meetings into the institutions.
But you didn't do the steps. It's good.
Not deeply.
Right.
I did it surface level to look good. I was all about the look good.
Right.
Right. And I got remarried, and we had, a house in a cul-de-sac, and I bought a business, a pet cemetery, and I was really doing that thing again, like playing the perfect role of the perfect life, and it just was surface.
Were you writing during this time at all?
No. And writing is what I did from a very young age after reading. That's the gateway drug to writing, right? So I started writing. Stories.
I guess listening to books is the gateway drug to speaking.
Yeah. Yeah. Or maybe YouTube. Listening to YouTube.
Yeah,
that is the gateway drug to speaking. I started writing, and I did, it's what I got attention for as a kid and in high school, and I won awards, and then I went to college and majored in writing and then got a master's degree in writing. But I stopped writing because I was like, I'm not going to pay the bills from writing, and I was a single mom for a decade, and I forgot. I only realized it later, looking back. It was like writing was how I made sense of the world, how I processed my inner world. So when I stopped writing, when I stopped doing drugs, which is like in the book, that's when I started writing again. Like the two things, no offense to like Bukowski and Hemingway, like those things can exist at the same time for me.
Right.
Right? It's one or the other.
So you've got the house on the cul-de-sac. You're a soccer mom. Appearances are all shiny and American, happy family. But things behind the surface or below the surface are you're kiting checks, you're stealing credit cards from people to help finance your habit and your expenses because all the money's going towards a drug.
Yeah. So I, in my second marriage, my husband brought, I found, I had to Google it, but I found he relapsed. I met him. He was in recovery, and he relapsed and started smoking heroin, and I found it in the house. And I remember driving. My kids were in Montessori school, and I was
Oh
driving
my
to do
gosh, the
I
Montessori
know.
mom.
I was driving to do a art project, and I'm not very arts and crafts, but involved words. And so I was going to do that at the school, and I remember at the stoplight Googling how to smoke heroin,
Oh my gosh.
right? And from that moment to my arrest was 11 months. I had lost everything.
So
And
heroin you would put on tinfoil and have a glass pipe and heat it. That's the
not a glass pipe, just tinfoil and I don't want to tell people how to do it,
well.
but,
I'm just
but
about,
like a lighter and
but
like
it's
a
different
straw
it's
or a pen
okay, right.
case.
I'm not
Yeah,
trying to.
yeah.
I don't do heroin, kids.
Don't do it.
No,
I mean, they
but
could
it's-
Google it.
But you're right. So so your life has changed from popping pills to smoking heroin. Is there a difference in the heroin versus Vicodin buzz, or is it just easier to get? Is that why people go to heroin?
I think it's easier to get, especially if people are in active addiction and they can't get the pain medication. You can't order it from Florida anymore. I mean, it is a natural progression. It's cheaper. It's easier. And again, this is 16 years ago, so we're not talking about fentanyl and all of the worries and all of that, right? So yeah, it was. I remember thinking, oh, this is so much more efficient. Which sounds horrible. I'm just being honest.
Yeah.
So yeah, I started, just to answer your question, I did start, the money, my world got really small. And
Because everything was focused on scoring.
it's just like this sort of endless cycle. And I kept saying okay, tomorrow I'll stop. Tomorrow I'll fix this. Tomorrow I'll because I knew right from wrong. I knew I don't want to drive my kids to private school. And while my friends are bringing their kids in, open up their car door and pull money out of their purse because it's private school, no one's locking their doors, or go in my neighbors and take their mail or look, so I knew that's not who I was, but I kept thinking I can't stop today because I will die. That's what it feels like.
And you wrote that you would throw yourself in front of a bus for your boys, but you couldn't stop using drugs for them.
It's really hard for people to reconcile.
Because you still feel like a good, normal person on one level, but you're out of control on the other.
I mean, I wanted to stop. Never as a kid was I like, Dear Diary, I hope someday I can.
Nobody's got that on their
No one
vision
does that,
board,
right? Yeah. And
heroin, abortion,
yeah,
bankruptcy. That's how my life.
incarceration.
Yeah, right. There you go.
Shot collar. But it feels like, the only way I can describe it is it feels like I'm going to die if I don't do this. It feels like you're very survival. So it's just like a reflex, okay, I just have to survive today, and then tomorrow I'll figure out how to stop, I'll make everything right, return what I stole, but I couldn't, when you get to tomorrow, it's the same thing again. It's this miserable existence every single day, but it's just a really inefficient way to kill yourself, right?
Yeah.
That's what it was. It was a really inefficient way. And I remember during that time thinking, what if I asked for help? And I thought, oh my gosh, I could never be away from my kids for 30 days to go to rehab.
How ironic is that?
I know. Believe me, I know. But I really, some of us learn things the hard way,
Sure.
right?
And this would be a general question to which there might not be one answer, but what percentage of people do you think who get to that point actually survive?
I don't know the percentages now. I know there's 48 million people in America struggling with substance use right now, with addiction. And then figure there's at least 2 people who love them, maybe, families. So, I mean, it's everywhere. And people talk about it more now than they did 16 years ago. People talk about mental health more now than they did 16 years ago. I know, the recovery rates in 12-step programs stuff are pretty low of people who get out of it. And there's not a lot of stories about people who get out of it.
So the law intervenes.
Yes.
And maybe saved your life because
Yeah.
you had to go to jail.
Yes.
We don't have to recount every single episode you recount in the book, but your life changes significantly from, the life of a Montessori mom to the life of an inmate.
Yeah. Yep.
How did that? How would you track the mental progression that you went through in jail?
I mean, I think from the moment of my arrest, I mean, I can still. There's a certain kind of pounding the police do on the door. Like,
It's a harrowing
they don't
recollection
knock.
in the book.
Yeah. And that moment is really like, it was like I didn't even know how to explain. It's still like a moment I dream about. It's still, and this is a long time ago now. But that moment where I was like, oh, I can't fix this. So part of me was in shock, in panic, and part of me was in relief at the same time. I know that getting arrested, going to jail, going through all of that horror was the best thing that could have happened to me. And also, I also know it's my children's trauma story.
How old were your kids when you got arrested?
So I had 2 in high school. They were a sophomore and a senior, 1 in junior high, and then my youngest, Caden, was about to turn 4. This was in November, it was election day when I got arrested, and his birthday's in mid-December, so he was about to turn 4. He was the only one home, and so he was taken by Child Protective Services, and that's the moment there's no story.
You can't even call a friend to come get him.
I tried. I mean, it's the law now, but the law in California anyway, but, what the law is and what the execution, who's implementing that, it's not like you're not in a place to like talk about. I wasn't in a place to say like, oh, it's my right. I begged and I asked, please let me call someone to get him. And the sheriff deputy said, no, he called Child Protective Services. And I think that's the low point, right? Because I'm, handcuffed trying to comfort my son who's never been away from me. So he's got stranger danger at that age. And I'm like, these people are friends. It's okay. You're trying to make it okay. But I didn't know what was going to happen. And I was not strong enough to deal with not knowing.
There are relapses in prison. There are things that start to look like they're going in the right direction. And there are setbacks. There are many setbacks. When did acceptance come into your life and you start to turn the corner?
Next year. No, no, just kidding. It's really, I started writing again. I started ghostwriting in jail with the women, and the women I was in jail with really saved me. Like, they explained the system. They took care of me because detoxing is not fun under any circumstances. But it was really, and the idea of not knowing, like, I didn't know for so long, am I going to never see my children again? Am I going to go to prison? Am I going to go fight fires? I was training for fire camp. Am I going to never see my children again? Will I see them again? Like, all of that unknowing is really hard for some of us to cope with. But it was really like, there was a moment, and it was March 18th, 2009, and I said, like, no matter what, I will never do drugs again. Like, no matter what. Like, I will get through. So, I was arrested in November, so it was March. I knew that's the first thing I had to do. And that's really when I started having, like, a little bit of hope. I had no idea, like, how hard it was going to be once I got out. But at the time, I was like, okay, despite all the felonies, I'm a rule follower. Like, I'm going to read all the paperwork. I'm going to do all the things I have to do. I'm going to serve my sentence. I'm going to pay back the money. I'm going to follow the rules of probation, and everything will be fine, and it will be over. And I had no idea about the sort of post-incarceration part of it.
Well, that's what's so, gosh, you think, well, here she is. She's done her time. She did what was right. She's getting sober. She's taking care of herself. But your fight just begins when you finally get out of jail.
Yeah. I mean, it's really, and I had no idea, like, I would, we would have little goodbye parties for the women in jail. Every single woman in there was full of good intentions when they left, right? I'm going to break up with the drug dealer boyfriend. I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to reconnect with my parents. I'm going to be a better, all the things. And I remember being in there, and I would see that same woman. We just, like, made a crazy commissary cake for with a hot pot of water and said goodbye and had a goodbye party would be arrested a week later. And I'm not proud of this, but I was like, how could she be so stupid? Like, I am never coming back here. But I had no idea how easy it is to come back for reasons that have nothing to do with committing a crime or doing a drug.
I think it's important that people understand this story that you're right out of prison. You have no place to live. You have no mode of transportation. You're not in touch with your kids yet. And you're trying to be in two different places at the same time based on two different charges that you had or two different mandates that you have to complete your parole or something like that.
Yeah. So I had, I was jobless, homeless, carless, friendless, my face had been
not with your friend, not in a place like jail became home for a little while, right? And so when you get out, you're like, it's like in Shawshank Redemption, where you're totally disoriented because you don't have any basis anymore.
Right. And I was a cautionary tale, right? Like none of my book club friends or the PT, like the school Montessori moms came to visit me, right? Like I was like, oh my gosh, like this.
You were the neighbor from hell.
I was the neighbor from hell.
Absolutely ostracized.
Yeah. And so I got out. I was determined to follow all the rules, but it's the same county, right? And the rules and laws vary, but I had 3 different courts monitoring me, 3 different courts, all in the same county wanting me to drug test on any given moment, right? You call numbers and it's like a surprise thing, which I was fine to do, but I didn't. At one point I had like a donated car from a charity that didn't go uphill. So
you can get to the drug clinic as long as it's downhill.
The number one reason women go back to jail, this is specifically women, is poverty, right? So if you think about how hard is it to get a job in general, how hard is it to get a job with a criminal record, but get a job with a criminal record where you can leave up to 3 times a day on short notice. It's like impossible.
Right. To say nothing of childcare.
Without childcare, transportation. Women specifically have like way more barriers than men. I couldn't get, because one of my charges was a drug charge because there were drugs in my house. I couldn't get like welfare benefits, cash benefits to feed my child. Like there's just all these ways in which we say we believe in like second chances and redemption and rehabilitation, but practically, it's a question. Do we really believe in that? It's hard.
Well, it's.
Do we let
there's
people
the theory, and then there's the actual programs that you're putting people through, all of which individually might make sense, but when looked at holistically, aren't possible to fulfill all those obligations.
Yeah, it's really, really impossible.
That seemed like the hardest. Was that the hardest part of the entire journey?
Is that the hardest part? It was the longest part of the entire journey. I mean, there's still things today that affect me 16 years later, right? That it doesn't matter how many New York Times bestsellers I've written, right? But
can you vote?
Yeah, I can vote.
Okay. You can't own a weapon?
No, but
not that you
guns.
necessarily want to.
Yeah, no. But I wouldn't want to anyway.
Right, yeah. How does it affect you today, I guess is what the...
I mean, here's one thing. So I since the book ended, the hardback book ended, I got divorced, and so had to sell my house. Super grateful to have a house. Didn't think I would ever own a house. And all of a sudden I was in this panic. Like, am I going to be able to rent a place? Because they're going to do a background check. And I was like super triggered up and panicking. Like,
and this is just a couple of years ago.
No, this is like this year.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Yeah. Even
though it's been 16 years, they're not like, there's no context if you have a criminal back record or not, right? And so that was like, I was in this sort of panic, that feeling again of like not being secure, right? And this happens to women right when they get out of jail. If you can't go through, even if you have a job, if you can't get a place through a legitimate rental company, then you're sort of underground, right, where you have no rights.
And you're beholden to lecherous landlords and things like that. And you had to pay, and this was also the financial part of it, is you had to pay back restitution, which was multiples of what you had ever stolen, to the victims of your, well, I said victims in air quotes. There were victims of your, but there were also people that took advantage of that
There was that, and then there was also the nature of, like I took a plea deal, so I wouldn't go to prison, so I could see my children again, and I would have pled guilty to like 2 million felonies and pay back $2 million, right, just to see my children again. But so I pled guilty to things I didn't do. So there's that. There was a lot. It's really hard to like get ahead. It's really hard to get a job and pay your bills and meet all the requirements to get my son back and pay this restitution, which is like compounding interest too.
Oh, gosh.
And then to make it worse is my husband at the time, we became co-defendants, right? Which is when the romance.
Your second husband, JD, was
DJ,
it? GJ,
which
DJ.
is when the romance is over, right? Like it's like
Your co-defendants.
Once we go husband and wife to co-defendants, but we had the same exact charges. We had the same exact sentence. The only thing that was different is I followed all the rules. He got in some trouble. He relapsed. He went back to jail a couple times, but he didn't have to pay any of that money back, even though it was joint and several, because they moved me out. We both were sentenced to drug court, and they wanted to kind of separate us. And so they rewarded me for good behavior, put me in family preservation court, which is great. But when he graduated drug court really quickly, like they gave him money, and suddenly he didn't have to pay it back, and he was off probation, and his record was expunged.
Why is that? Well,
like bureaucracy, I think. And so some of it was just bureaucracy, and like the judge would say, because I remember asking when they rewarded me, I said, will I get the same benefits? Which part of the deal was like complete all of these things and you can get your record cleared. And I was like, great. And I asked them at the time, they're like, yeah, of course. But it was never got in like the file, And so, and then the other thing is like women are judged much more harshly. Like there's no judge that ever said to my ex-husband, how could you do this as a father? Who's taking care of your children? Like women, they're judged a lot more harshly.
One of the police officers told you don't deserve to be a mother?
He said, because this was at my arrest, and I was crying, wanting to know where my son was, and he said, you'll never see your children again, and you should not be anyone's mother. And I believed him. I was just like, oh, he's right. Like, this is my worst fear.
Tell me about your relationship with your sons today.
I mean, it's amazing, and they're amazing, and, they forgave me right away. They came to visit every week, and I've gotten questions. There's actually one man at a book event at this Manhattan Beach Library, and it was maybe about 100 women in there, and he raised his hand, and I called him to ask a question. He said, how did you get your children to love you again and want to be with you? And the sound of, 99 women sliding back their chairs. And I was like, no, it's okay.
He's about to get beat down.
But, I mean, it's a fair question, but I said, they just wanted me to be okay. They never
kept
did
saying to
love
you,
me.
just get better. They
just wanted me to be better.
Yeah.
And the work was, when I got out, I just made sure I showed up, right? If I said I was going to be somewhere, I was there. Day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, and my oldest son was going off to college right after I got out, and he went to Cal Poly, Dillon, and he was maybe 3 months into college, and he calls me and he goes, Mom, I need to change my address over to you. Dad keeps losing my mail, and you're the most trustworthy adult in my life. And the minute he said that, I was like, oh, and they're resilient and funny and kind and compassionate, and nobody wants to be their kid's college essay topic. You know what I mean?
Not for that anymore.
No, not for that.
Yeah.
So that is the thing I regret. Like, I know this was what was best for me, but I regret that is, they were the collateral damage. This is part of their story. But, I'm biased, but they're amazing.
Yeah. How did you go through the process of forgiving yourself? Not that it's over for any of us, by the way. But
it's a process.
Yeah.
I had so much shame for at least a dozen years, right? And the whole time I was sort of building this resume of goodness and keeping my past a secret. So I always describe it like there's two trains. there's like the Truth Train, which is going to come out, because I was working, in a literary agency, and I was working with all these amazing people in the world and doing all this good work, and I was hiding behind the scenes doing it. I was ghostwriting, and I was building this sort of resume of goodness, so that when the truth came out and people found out, like, oh, you're actually bad, right? This is what I was thinking. Or you went to jail, or you used to be a drug addict, I'd be like, yeah, but look, Nelson Mandela thanked me in his last book. Like I was doing this sort of goodness adjacent without really consciously doing it. But it was like, one, it felt good. I felt like I was valuable, right? But it's a lonely place to be, too, because the people I was working with, like the authors, didn't know, and my new friends didn't know, so I couldn't really make new friends. So it's a really lonely place to be, and I just lived in fear of someone Googling me at all times, like that Neighbor from Hell headline. So before you Google me, I'm going to make sure I've proven, Oprah picked a book I co-authored back then, so I'm Oprah good. Like I was just,
good.
I was getting, racking that up. But it's a really, like, it's so isolating. And while going to jail made me a better parent, because there's nothing my boys couldn't talk to me about, and nothing their friends couldn't talk to me about in high school, because I was not coming from a place of judgment. It really built my empathy. In the rest of the world, I was, so worried about the judgment I imagined that I just kept my distance, which is really hard.
Let's talk about that job that you got. Can you walk us through that process of getting the job and then having to come clean? Yeah,
so I was 2 years post-jail and really struggling to support Kate. I'd gotten Kate back and really, like, how am I going to work? I was writing for online, like for this company called Content Divas, right? I was on probation. I couldn't leave the county, but, I was writing like SEO blogs about traveling in Hawaii,
Right, yeah.
And it was great because I had a deadline every day, and I loved that. But I saw this Craigslist ad for a part-time personal assistant at a literary agency that worked with Desmond Tutu. So part of me was like, okay, I'm going to get murdered. Obviously, this is not real, but it had these, like, again, it was like 5 hours a week, $20 an hour. And it had, maybe 20 something questions, like really essay questions. And I answered them all honestly without saying anything about my past. But I was honest, like that was important to me, like, how do you handle crisis? So I answered all these questions, right? Like, I'm great in a crisis. What does integrity mean to you? That was one of the questions. So it was really like interesting exercise. And I went to the interview with a man named Doug Abrams, and it was at his house. It was uphill, and I had that car that couldn't go uphill, which was stressful.
It's very Aaron Brockovich type moment.
Yeah. And, again, I had worked at a small press in college and graduate school. I had an MFA in creative writing. So on paper, I was overqualified for the job. And so he didn't hire me right away. He had me test like on personal assistant things. And then he gave me he was working on Desmond Tutu's biography, and he had me edit that up. And then he's like, I'm representing this author. It was a doctor, and he's doing this book. Like, can you look at it and see what you think? And I had this whole idea how to structure it. And I was so scared. He put me on the phone with the author. I wasn't even hired yet. And I was like, I can't talk to an author. Like, I was just freaking out. And they liked my idea, and then suddenly I started helping write that with this author, and then the book sold for like $700,000 for the proposal.
Huge advance, right?
And so I got hired, and I was working in the office with him, and again, it was supposed to be part-time, and I was feeling so good and valuable, and he had called me brilliant, and we represented, I don't know if you've heard of the book, What Color's Your Parachute?
Oh, yeah, for
right?
sure, yeah.
So they were doing the updated version. I was on the phone with Dick Bowles, and he was doing the updated version of that book.
That's a career
It's a career guidance book, yeah. And so they had said to Doug and I couldn't hear that. I was in the office with Doug. I could only hear his end of the conversation. And I was just typing away. I didn't even have a desk. I was typing on my lap on a laptop, and I guess Dick Pulls had said, so now everybody Googles their employees. I'd working there maybe 3 or 4 weeks and was killing it.
Yeah.
And I just remember, like the air in the room changed, like right before a storm, and I looked up and Doug was staring at me, like his face was sheet white. And so when Dick Bowles had said this to him, he Googled me, and that headline popped up, Neighbor from Hell. Now I'm working in his house. He's got kids in same age as mine in junior high.
You're depositing his checks and paying bills and stuff.
I mean, Doug is so trusting that I never would have violated his trust. But like my first day there, his assistant for 5 years, like handed me like the bank book with all the passwords, all the things and the keys, and left and said, figure out, she was gone. And so, his face, was just white as a ghost. And I was like, oh no, shit. And he had just called me brilliant 2 days ago. So it felt so good. And he kind of hung up the phone. He was like, I just Googled you and I never checked your references. And I need to think about this. And I just like handed the keys and everything to him. He's like, come back tomorrow. And I left saying, I will never come back. Like, there's just no way. Like, this is my dream job. Right. And there's no way I can come back tomorrow. But I came back the next day, and it
would have fit very much in line with your string of luck if he had been a person with less integrity and faith and courage.
Yeah, if he hadn't been a person working with Desmond Tutu, and he didn't have to say, "Am I going to actually walk my talk?" Right. That's really what he did. He thought about it. He called my references, and he's like, I have to, am I someone who can walk my talk? Like, do I believe in, Desmond Tutu, who did the Truth and, Reconciliation Commission, like he helped a whole country forgive and have second chances. And he was like, okay, I have to do that, but maybe you don't handle the credit cards, right? I was like, fair enough. So I went back and I the next day, and it was really the hardest thing I had to do. And I said, I'm really sorry I put you in this position. And it's important to me that, I didn't lie to you. Because I had a don't ask, don't tell policy around it. Like, if you ask me. And I said, and I'm just as brilliant today as I was 2 days ago. And so that was, my like speech I laid up all night preparing. And he's like, okay, well, I'll keep you on. And he trusted me and he believed in me, and I was never going to do anything to violate that. When I finally left 12 years later, I was CEO. It was like the biggest nonfiction agency in the world. And, he used to hand me his receipts out of his wallet. And Doug's a brilliant man and very innocent. He doesn't have a lot of street smarts. I helped him have some more street smarts.
Mama Love had to give him some jailhouse knowledge.
I remember one time, maybe 6 months later, we had like a fraudulent charge on the company credit card. Yep. I turned into full CIA, FBI. I tracked this down. He'd hand me receipts, and I would like, there'd be $1, and I was like, is this a test? I'd be like, hey, this was mixed in your receipts, and give it back. But I ended up, writing and working and traveling the world. And you co-wrote several very important books. Yeah, I worked as a collaborative author. I did the book Designing Your Life, which is now the #1 career book. It took over for What Color's Your Parachute with Stanford professors, and I did the Book of Forgiving with Desmond Tutu, and The Sun Does Shine with Anthony Ray Hinton, and just so many books.
When did you know it was time for this?
It was the end of 2019.
I was just pointing at her book, by the way, if you're listening.
Yeah, it was the end of 2019, and I was still carrying all this shame and so afraid that these authors, you get really close to people when you're helping them write their book, and when you're being them on the page, right? Because you're in their head. And
you have to write in their voice.
Yeah,
not
you
just
write
not as
them.
Laura, but as...
No, it's not a biography about... If I were writing your book, I am Paul.
But you have to also speak like me and think like me and use my mannerisms or my verbal mannerisms, my phrases, my sarcastic wit,
speech.
Whatever it is, you've got to think. Because I've worked
brilliant analytics.
I've worked with writers, like comedy writers, and it's like they write great jokes, but I read their words and I hear their voice.
It's voice. Yeah, it is voice, which is really hard to teach. I've trained like a dozen collaborative writers, but voice. That's why I always pull fiction writers to do nonfiction, that kind of work, because they know as a fiction writer, you're used to seeing the world through other people's character.
Because you have to create characters.
And do voice, right? So if you can do that, then it's way easier for someone to beat you than like a journalist or a creative nonfiction person.
That makes sense,
yeah. So I had a friend who I'd known, pre-arrest when my older boys were really young, and she like curated the local TEDx. And so for like 5 years, she would come to me like, "Do you want to do a talk about your experience?" I was like, "Hell no, no way." And so she would do this every year. I was like, "Nope, nope, nope." And then 2019, she came to my office. She's like, "I'm not leaving till you say yes."
Good for her.
And she stayed for hours. And finally I said, "Okay," but it was like in a few days. So I had to quickly like write and memorize something.
It's only 12 minutes or 11 minutes. Come on,
It's
you
felt
got
like
that.
an eternity. So I got up there and I said out loud on a stage the thing I was afraid everyone was going to find out when they Googled. And it was such a great feeling. It's better than any drug I've ever taken, honestly. That feeling of just like unburdening and sort of saying the shameful thing out loud. And I was like, oh, I want more of that.
Yeah.
I want more of that. And people didn't like run screaming out of the room. They like gave me a standing ovation, and that felt good. Not for like performing, but just being honest.
Yeah.
And so I decided to do the book. I wrote a book proposal. Doug agented it. It sold at auction to Simon & Schuster. And then I had to go write the book. Because in nonfiction, you don't write the book first.
Yeah, no, you submitted some sample chapters, I suppose,
Yeah,
and
it was
outlines.
A book proposal, sort of annotated table of contents.
Yeah. How long did it take you to write it?
So I went, I wrote the whole first draft in 7 weeks.
Wow.
But it took, because I was used to writing under pressure, because as a collaborative writer, I also had like 4 other full-time jobs at the agency. And I only did that for like the authors we represented. And it was always, you get a year contract, maybe the last 2 months, you'd be like, oh, shoot, I gotta write this.
We all still manage our lives like we're high school sophomores.
Yeah, I know.
With
Some
a
of us
term
need
paper
deadlines
due.
and insane pressure. So I was like, I'm not going to wait till the last minute. And, I have this advance. And so I'm going to go away and do it. And so I went somewhere I'd always wanted to go, I think because I saw a Leonardo DiCaprio movie once, but I went to Koh Samui, Thailand.
Oh, yeah.
By myself.
I've been to Koh Samui.
By myself for 7 weeks, because I was like, if I'm going to be honest, I'm only going to do this, I'm going to be honest, and be honest for real. Because when you can write and razzle-dazzle, I could fool some people into thinking I was being really honest when I wasn't. And so I went there, and I didn't, there was a little window where my kids could call me and work could call me. And I wrote in my mind, it was just an arbitrary deadline. This is in the winter, and the book wasn't due till June. And I was like, I have to get a whole first draft because I know how to write fast and I know what I'm going to say. And I wrote such a big book proposal. I had stuff already written. And I finished, like the last chapter was like in Doha, which I didn't even know where that was, but connecting back. I was just like, I have to finish before I get back. And I wrote things that my editor didn't know and my agent didn't know that weren't in the proposal. Because I was like, if I'm going to be really honest. So I did that, and then the editing process, Eamon Dolan at Simon Schuster's my editor. It was painful. He cut out a lot of my jokes and
Kill your babies.
And all my dreams, which I get it, dreams are boring. But it was like 2 days before it was going into production. He said, we need another chapter. And I was like, what? Because it was like literally 3 days before it was going to go into production, copy editing. And he's like, we need a chapter of you committing your crimes. Because I started the book at the moment of my arrest. And I had to stop and be like, oh, wait, I'm being honest. But I actually didn't want to write the chapter of me doing bad things because people are going to judge. So the staycation chapter I wrote on a Wednesday afternoon.
Oh, it was so disturbing.
I know.
Because not just like, it was from a financial management standpoint, I was like, what are you doing? And,
Yeah.
and by the time you get another chapter and you're like, oh, that's the least of it.
I've never gotten the financial management read of my book. But
Well, no, I mean, like that was my... Well, I vaguely, I mean, like,
Yeah.
I knew what the book was about, but you don't know how deep and I've read several addiction memoirs that some friends of mine have written, and as a reader, you're just like, please stop.
I know.
Please, I care about you already.
Yeah.
I want you to stop.
Yeah.
But it gets worse before it gets better.
Yeah, it does. And he was right to have that, and I had to be,
Oh, I think so. I think so.
Yeah, and it was good, and I knew right when he said it, because I was like, I started protesting, but it's in present tense, and I don't want to go back in time, and you got to start in the action. And, like, I do books for a living. I know what'll, and I had to get honest. It's like, I know people are going to judge me, and I was trying to control the level of judgment I might get, and then I had to confront my own. I'm being really honest. So.
But if you don't do that, then the reader doesn't trust you either. I
Yeah.
mean, like, I think, well, or
Yeah.
they don't. I've read memoirs too where they gloss over some of the stuff that's
Yeah.
unsavory, and you're like,
Yeah.
I don't trust you so much.
Yeah. Yeah. There was no part of me that was trying to look good
Right.
in the rest of the book, but I just wanted to start it. So I went back, and he was right. I knew it started the day before. Like, I knew exactly what scene we needed to do. So it came quick.
It's effective. This is,
Yeah.
again, listeners, viewers, this book will blow your mind. I hope you read it. I want to ask you a few more questions, and I'm going to let you go. I want to ask you to rate your happiness from 1 to 10 during these 3 different periods of your life.
Okay.
If you can consider them. Number 1, when you were using. 2, when you were in jail, and then today.
And it starts at 1.
Well, 0 to 10 or 1 to scale 1 to 10. Sure.
I would. Well, let's see. Let me be honest. So using, I would say my happiness. Using is a 1. And in jail, I would say the beginning of jail was a 1. The second half of jail, I would say, we'll give it a 5. And the last one is now.
Now.
I would say my happiness level on average is a solid 8 with some peaks and valleys.
Sure.
Day to day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's good.
Okay. Is there anyone in the world who is irredeemable?
No. And I only say that with confidence because Desmond Tutu told me that. He said he would never, the minute you deem anyone a monster or irredeemable, you take away their humanity. So you take away all possibility of redemption.
What would he have said about Hitler? And that's the obvious extreme, right? But I mean...
Yeah. But again, Hitler as a baby didn't write, "Dear Diary, I hope I can be Hitler." Like, I mean, it's like, I think, I don't know what point you cross the line. And it's easy to say that in theory if it hasn't affected my children, But fundamentally, just like everybody who has done horrible things, everybody who's incarcerated for not doing horrible things, like there's a context to their story. And I think the context matters. And we have a system that doesn't really allow for a lot of room of context. I'm not giving context to Hitler, whatever those. But I think
Lara Love says Hitler was misunderstood.
No. But I do think, like I have a nonprofit that helps women in jail, specifically in prison. And close to 100% of women who are incarcerated have histories of childhood trauma, sexual abuse, histories of domestic violence. Like, it's this traumatized population. I worked with Anthony Ray Hinton on The Sun Does Shine, who was on death row for 30 years as an innocent man. And even the men he was in prison with had humanity to them, who helped each other and had context to their stories, even though they committed atrocious crimes and took lives.
What's the name of your charity?
It's called the Gemma Project.
And we'll put a link to it in the show notes.
GemmaProject.org. But it's gender and trauma responsive services. So it's 12 weeks of programming in custody and then 18 months of services and support after. So women aren't going to jail because their car doesn't go uphill.
Right.
And they can't get to a drug test or have childcare. So I'm excited. We just got a very big grant from the state of California, which is huge.
That's great.
Yeah.
How many women have you helped?
We have a model site in Northern California, and the recidivism rate of, it's based on the original Gemma program I did in jail, which is women created to say, here's what we actually need. And it's a 30% reduction in recidivism. So the recidivism rate is 40%. The recidivism rate normally is 70%, means 70% of people go back to jail. With our program, it's only 30%.
That's
so
great.
We're hoping to replicate the site across the country.
And how many people have told you that your book has helped them?
Thousands.
Yeah?
Yeah. Thousands.
How's
Everybody
that
tells me their
feel?
secrets too. Everybody's got secrets. Oh, I have secrets on LinkedIn and my voicemail on Instagram, on Facebook, because because I told all my secrets.
Right.
And so people feel safe.
They want to tell their.
They
They want
want-
to get. They want to shed
They
that
want
burden.
to, yeah, they want, and people are carrying a lot more than we know.
Yeah. How's that feel?
Do you want to tell me a secret right now?
I wish I had something witty to say. No, I don't. I'm
Okay,
going to
good.
keep my secret.
All right,
Somebody
good.
said like you should try ayahuasca. You know, you should do you'll purge your toxins and unearth your childhood traumas. And I was like, one, I don't really want to shed my toxins in a in Costa Rica, and two, I like my traumas buried.
Yeah, deep
I like
down.
them. I like them
Yeah,
earthed.
where they could fester.
That's right. Exactly.
It's not in the book, but I did do ayahuasca before
Oh,
I
you
wrote
did?
my book. I went to Costa Rica to
Uh-huh.
a place called Solterra.
Was it helpful?
Yeah. Gabor Mate is an advisor, and I know him through work, and so he sort of counseled me. He's like, this is medicine, not drugs.
Right.
But the first night I was like, have I just fooled myself?
This is drugs.
I was like, am I getting high with strangers
Yeah.
in the jungle and calling this medicine? Like, it freaked
Yeah.
me out because I hadn't felt anything in my body for 13, 14 years.
Yeah.
And I was slammed. But it was some Harry Potter level magic happening in that jungle. Yeah.
Wow.
That's a whole, maybe I'll put
There's
it in
your
the next book. I
There
know.
you go. All right, we're gonna do true or false, and then we'll leave.
Okay.
I'm gonna read a statement. You're gonna say true or false.
Okay.
These are supposed to be fun. Just to be
Fun?
clear.
Okay.
Fun. Yeah. True or false? Once an author is in Oprah's book club, all her problems are solved and her life is perfect.
False.
True or false? Jail is fun.
Sometimes true.
True or false? On average, women in prison are just as kind as women on the PTA.
False. They're kinder.
They're kinder. All right. True.
You
or
met fundraising moms. Come on.
I have. They're certainly motivated, if not unkind. Okay, true or false? Lunch with the Dalai Lama is more enjoyable than kicking heroin in jail.
True.
Okay, there we are. Lara Love, your book is so powerful. It's it's a beautiful work, and thank you for sharing yourself with the world.
Thank you. Thank you for having me and reading it.
It's my pleasure. We're going to put the link to the book and the Gemma Project in the show notes, and I hope you'll follow up on both. Thanks. We'll see you next time.